This is a story about a brother. It's about a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette L88, one of only 20 ever built. It's about a single father in Cheyenne, Wyoming, who hadn't returned to the Bonneville Salt Flats in 8 years. It's about a billionaire who thought a United States senator could keep him above the law. It's about a wildcat oil driller named Cody Caldwell, who died on a Wyoming highway in November of 2024, and whose brother spent 14 months learning that the accident was not an accident. His name is Wyatt Caldwell. He is 49 years old. He owns a small garage on the east side of Cheyenne, 3 blocks from the Union Pacific rail yards, where he restores 1967 to 1972 Chevrolet Corvettes for collectors across the American West. His father came from a German farming family in Goshen County, Wyoming. His mother still lives in a small house in Pine Bluffs, 90 miles east of Cheyenne. He has one child, a daughter named Cheyenne, 18 years old, a professional rodeo barrel racer, ranked in the top 15 of the Women's Professional Rodeo Association Wyoming circuit. Wyatt's wife, Eliza, died on the Bonneville Salt Flats in Tooele County, Utah, on the afternoon of August 12, 2018. She was 38 years old. She was struck by lightning during a Wyoming summer thunderstorm that arrived over the salt without warning, while she was checking timing equipment 30 feet outside the cockpit of a 1969 Chevrolet Corvette ZL1 that her husband was preparing to drive. Their daughter Cheyenne was 8 years old. She watched from the trailer pit area 200 feet away. Wyatt survived because he was sitting inside the steel and fiberglass roll cage. He has not returned to Bonneville since. This is a story about a brother who would not stop. It's about the difference between a brake line cut by a Wyoming highway accident and a brake line cut by a precision machinist's tool of the kind found on a wildcat oil rig. It's about a 1967 Corvette L88 chassis number that meant something to Reed Holcomb, a Casper oil billionaire whose name appears on the side of a building at the University of Wyoming, and whose campaign contributions appear on the federal election filings of a United States senator named Bradley Whitmore. It's about a man who drove 7 hours to Salt Lake City, Utah, on the morning of March 14, 2026, because he did not trust a single Wyoming law enforcement officer to read his brother's handwritten letter. This is a story about justice and about a salt flat that takes everything. Caldwell Performance sits on East Lincoln Way, in the industrial corridor of Cheyenne that runs parallel to Interstate 80 and the Union Pacific main line. The building is 1 story, concrete block-painted barn red, with a hand-painted sign in the parking lot that reads Caldwell Performance, Corvette Specialist, 1967-1972. There is no website, there is no social media account. Wyatt Caldwell does not advertise. His clients find him through word of mouth in the collector community, and he turns away more cars than he accepts. Inside the garage on the morning of March 3, 2026, Wyatt was finishing the polish on a 1969 Corvette Stingray that belonged to a retired Air Force colonel from Colorado Springs. The car was Daytona yellow. The engine bay was clean enough to eat from. The colonel would arrive at noon to take delivery. Wyatt had been working on the car for 7 months. On the back wall of the garage, above the workbench where he kept his torque wrenches, was a wooden plaque. It was 8 inches by 10 inches. The brass plate at the bottom read Caldwell, Class CMS 2184 mph, August 11, 1998, Bonneville Salt Flats below it, a second plaque smaller, plain wood with no brass. Eliza Caldwell, 1980 to 2018, we were going to break the record. Again, Wyatt did not look at the plaques. He had not looked at them in 8 years. He was 49 years old. He stood 6 feet 1 inch and weighed 210 pounds. He had a gray-streaked beard that he kept short, blue eyes that his mother said came from his German great-grandfather, and a faded blue tattoo on his right forearm that read Cody, 1986. The 1986 was the year his brother was born. Wyatt had given himself the tattoo with a sewing needle and India ink at 13 years old, the week his mother brought Cody home from the hospital. Cody was 9 years younger than Wyatt. He had died on Wyoming State Highway 85, 23 miles north of Casper, on November 9, 2024. He was 38 years old. The Wyoming Highway Patrol report listed the cause of death as a single-vehicle accident. Driver lost control of a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette L88 on a section of highway where black ice was reported by other drivers earlier that morning. The car left the road at an estimated speed of 78 miles per hour, struck a concrete drainage culvert, and rolled twice. Cody died instantly of blunt force trauma. The Corvette did not burn. The chassis remained largely intact. The Wyoming Highway Patrol released the wreckage to Wyatt 3 weeks later, after the toxicology came back clean and the report was closed. Wyatt put the Corvette in the back bay of his garage under a green tarp. He did not touch it for 14 months. He could not look at it. He could not throw it away. On the morning of March 3, 2026, the green tarp was still on the car. The bell over the front door rang at 9:45. Wyatt looked up. His daughter Cheyenne walked into the garage carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the Black Tooth Coffee Company across the street, the way she did every Tuesday and Thursday morning before her training sessions at the Frontier Park Arena. She was 18 years old, 5 feet 5 inches, 120 pounds, long brown hair tied in a working braid. She wore dark wash Wranglers, a pearl snap shirt the color of the Wyoming sky in October, and a pair of Justin boots that had been resoled twice. She had her mother's mouth and her father's blue eyes. She had been raising barrel racing horses since she was 11 years old. She had been the WPRA Wyoming Circuit Reserve champion the previous October. She was ranked 14th in the WPRA standings as of February. She needed to finish in the top 10 to qualify for the National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas in December. She set the coffee on the workbench. She did not look at the green tarp. "Daddy," she said, "Tornado Bell threw a shoe this morning. I need you to call Marcus and see if he can come out this afternoon." Marcus was the farrier from Pine Bluffs. Wyatt picked up his cell phone and made the call. Marcus said he could be at the arena by 4 o'clock. Wyatt hung up. Cheyenne sipped her coffee. She looked at the Corvette under the green tarp. "You haven't looked at it," she said. Wyatt did not answer. "Daddy," she said, "it's been 14 months. Wyatt set down his polishing cloth. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the green tarp. He looked back at his daughter. "Tomorrow," he said. Cheyenne nodded. She walked over to the workbench. She picked up the second cup of coffee. She walked back to her father. She handed it to him. "You said that last week," she said. She walked out of the garage. The bell over the door rang behind her. Wyatt held the coffee. He looked at the green tarp. He looked at the plaques on the back wall, the brass one with his name and the date and the speed, and the small, plain wooden one with no brass. He set down the coffee. He walked to the back bay. He pulled the green tarp off the 1967 Chevrolet Corvette L88, chassis number 194377 S104592, the only Sunfire yellow L88 ever finished at the GM plant in St. Louis, Missouri in 1967, one of only 20 1967 L88 Corvettes ever built. The car his brother Cody had bought at the Meckham auction in Glendale, Arizona on March 19, 2019, for $1,420,000 in cash. The car his brother Cody had driven into a concrete drainage culvert on Wyoming State 85 at 78 miles per hour on the morning of November 9, 2024. The Sunfire yellow paint on the rear quarter panel was cracked but intact. The chassis was bent. The right rear wheel was pushed 3 inches inboard. Wyatt knelt down beside the wreckage. He reached under the rocker panel. He ran his thumb along the brake line that fed the right rear caliper. He felt the cut. He felt where the precision tool had bitten through the steel braiding, exactly 17 inches above the caliper, exactly where a Wildcat oil rig machinist would know to make the cut if he wanted the line to fail at a specific moment under high-speed deceleration. Wyatt Caldwell did not cry, he did not curse, he did not stand up. He stayed on his knees in the back bay of Caldwell Performance, his right thumb pressed against the cut brake line of his dead brother's 1967 Corvette L88 for 43 minutes. When he stood up, he walked to the workbench. He picked up his cell phone. He did not call the Wyoming Highway Patrol. He did not call the Laramie County Sheriff's Office. He did not call the Cheyenne Police Department. He walked into his office at the back of the garage. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk. He took out a manila folder that his brother Cody had given him on Thanksgiving Day, 2024, 6 days before Cody died, and said, "Wyatt, if anything ever happens to me, don't trust anybody in Wyoming with this. Drive it to Utah." Wyatt opened the folder. He began to read. The manila folder was 3/4 of an inch thick. The papers inside were arranged in chronological order, the oldest at the back, the newest at the front. Cody Caldwell had been a wildcatter for 16 years. He had run his own one-man operation out of a single-wide trailer office on the north side of Casper, drilling shallow exploratory wells across the Powder River Basin on speculative leases, mostly for himself and occasionally for small investor groups out of Denver. He had owned 3 drilling rigs, 11 trucks, and a piece of land at the corner of Salt Creek Road and Bureau of Land Management Access, Route 47, where he had set up a maintenance shop and a parts yard. He had been good with paperwork. He had kept every contract, every lease, every assay report, every Bureau of Land Management filing, every Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission permit, every Internal Revenue Service Form 1099 he had ever received or issued. He had kept them in 3 filing cabinets in the back room of the trailer. The papers in the Manila folder were copies of one specific category of document. They were correspondence, letters, emails printed out, certified mail receipts between Cody Caldwell and Holcomb Energy Holdings, the Casper-based oil and gas exploration company owned by Reed Holcomb. The first letter was dated April 3, 2023. It was on Holcomb Energy Holdings letterhead. It was signed by a man named Garrett Voss, who held the title of Vice President of Land Acquisition. The letter offered to purchase Cody Caldwell's mineral rights on 3 parcels of land in the Powder River Basin, Section 14, Township 39 North, Range 78 West, Section 22 of the same township and range, and Section 6, Township 40 North, Range 78 West. The combined acreage was approximately 1,920 acres. The offered price was $2,800,000. Cody had written his response in pen across the bottom of the letter in his familiar slanted handwriting, no. The second letter was dated June 14, 2023, same letterhead, same signatory. The offer had increased to $4,200,000. Cody's response across the bottom, still no. The third letter was dated September 2, 2023. The offered price was $6 million. Cody's response, tell Holcomb to stop wasting paper. The fourth letter, dated November 21, 2023, was no longer signed by Garrett Voss. It was signed by Reed Holcomb himself. It was shorter. It contained no dollar figure. It said, Mr. Caldwell, we need to meet. I think you do not understand what is on those 3 sections. I think when you understand, you will be reasonable. Call my office. Cody had written across the bottom, know exactly what is on the sections, not for sale. The 5th document in the folder was not a letter. It was a Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission permit application, dated January 8, 2024, filed by Holcomb Energy Holdings, requesting permission to begin horizontal hydraulic fracturing operations on a section of land adjacent to Cody Caldwell's Section 14. The permit application included a topographic map. Cody had marked the map with a red pen. He had circled an area that crossed from Holcomb's adjacent section directly into Cody's Section 14, approximately 1,200 feet across the property line. The 6th document was a handwritten page of Cody's notes, dated February 11, 2024. It said, Holcomb is going to frack across the property line. He thinks he can pull from under my sections without paying me a royalty. He thinks I won't notice. I have a downhole survey from 2019. I will notice. I am going to file with the WOG and the BLM. If he does this, he will be looking at a federal trespass case. He knows it. That is why he keeps trying to buy me out. The 7th document, dated August 6, 2024, was a copy of a formal complaint Cody had filed with the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. The complaint alleged that Holcomb Energy Holdings had begun fracturing operations on January 22, 2024, and that the horizontal lateral had crossed onto Cody Caldwell's mineral estate by an estimated 940 feet, and that Holcomb Energy was extracting hydrocarbons from Caldwell's mineral estate without lease, contract, royalty payment, or notification. The 8th document, dated September 30, 2024, was the WOGC's response. The response stated that the matter would be referred to the Bureau of Land Management for federal investigation, and that a hearing would be scheduled. The hearing date was set for December 2, 2024. Cody Caldwell had died on November 9, 2024, 23 days before the hearing. The 9th document in the folder was not a letter or a permit or a complaint. It was a single piece of yellow legal pad paper folded twice. The handwriting was Cody's. The date at the top was November 16, 2024, 3 days before he died. It said, Wyatt, if you are reading this, I am dead. It was Holcomb. He came to the shop on Wednesday with 2 men in a black Chevrolet Suburban. The men did not get out of the truck. Holcomb told me that the WOG hearing was not going to happen. He told me that I should reconsider his offer. He told me he would give me $10 million and I should sign by Friday. I told him no. He said something about my truck. He said he hoped I drove carefully on the back roads. Then he left. I am writing this down because I do not believe Holcomb will let me make it to December 2nd. I do not trust the Wyoming Highway Patrol because Senator Whitmore appointed the current superintendent. I do not trust the Laramie County Sheriff because his last campaign was funded by Holcomb's PAC. I do not trust anybody in this state. If something happens to me, take this folder. Take the Corvette. Drive it to Utah. The FBI field office in Salt Lake City does not answer to Wyoming politicians. Tell them everything. Take care of Cheyenne. I love you, Cody. Wyatt Caldwell set the letter down on his desk. He sat in his office chair for 1 hour and 17 minutes without moving. At 3:48 in the afternoon, he picked up his cell phone. He called Cheyenne. He told her he was going to drive to Pine Bluffs to see his mother. He told her he might be gone for 2 days. He asked her to stay with her grandmother's friend Helen, the way she did when he traveled to auctions. Cheyenne did not ask questions. She said, "Daddy, is something wrong?" Wyatt said, "I will explain when I get back." "I love you." He hung up. He did not drive to Pine Bluffs. He drove to Salt Lake City. The drive from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Salt Lake City, Utah is 443 miles. The route runs west on Interstate 80 across the high plateau of southern Wyoming, past Laramie and Rawlins and Rock Springs, across the Continental Divide twice, through the Bridger-Teton National Forest in the southwest corner of the state, then down into the Bear River Valley of northeastern Utah, then west along the southern shore of the Great Salt Lake. It takes approximately 7 hours. Wyatt left Cheyenne at 4:30 in the afternoon on March 3rd. He drove his 1969 Chevrolet Corvette ZL1 painted Cortez silver with the original aluminum 427 cubic inch big block and the M22 4-speed Muncie transmission. It was the car he had set the Bonneville record in August of 1998. It was the car Eliza had been timing on the afternoon she died. It was the car he had not driven on a long highway in 8 years. He did not stop except for fuel. He arrived in Salt Lake City at 11:47 that night. He checked into a Best Western on West Temple Street. He did not sleep. At 7 o'clock on the morning of March 4th, 2026, he ate breakfast at a diner on State Street. At 8:15, he walked into the Salt Lake City field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation at 1192 South 4500 West, carrying the Manila folder, a USB drive containing 47 photographs of the Corvette restoration in progress, a sample of the cut brake line wrapped in butcher paper, and his brother Cody's handwritten letter from November 6th. The intake officer at the front desk was a young woman with short brown hair and a maroon University of Utah pin on her lapel. She asked him what the matter concerned. Wyatt told her that his brother had been murdered in Wyoming and that he believed the local Wyoming authorities could not be trusted to investigate the case. The intake officer did not respond. She picked up her desk phone. She made a call. She told someone on the other end that there was a walk-in. She listened. She hung up. She said, "Mr. Caldwell, Special Agent Sarah Hartwell will be down in 5 minutes. Please have a seat." Special Agent Sarah Hartwell came down the elevator at 8:23. She was 44 years old. She had spent 19 years with the Bureau, the last 7 in the Public Corruption Unit of the Salt Lake City Field Office, which has federal jurisdiction over Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, and Montana for matters that local authorities cannot or will not handle. She had worked the Senator John Edwards campaign finance case in 2011. She had worked the Operation Varsity Blues investigation in 2019. She had worked 4 state-level corruption cases involving sitting governors and senators. She was, in the careful language of her supervisor, the right agent when politics gets in the way of facts. She took Wyatt to a small conference room on the 3rd floor. She brought coffee. She closed the door. She said, "Mr. Caldwell, tell me what you have." Wyatt told her. He took 2 hours and 11 minutes. He started with Cody. He told her about the Wildcat operation, the 3 sections of mineral rights, the 4 purchase offers from Holcomb Energy, the Wogsee complaint, the hearing scheduled for December 2nd, the visit from Holcomb on November 6th, the letter Cody had written that night, the death on the highway 3 days later, the closed Wyoming Highway Patrol report, the 14 months the Corvette had sat under the green tarp, and the cut he had found that morning on the brake line. He showed her the photographs. He showed her the letter. He gave her the sample of the cut brake line. Special Agent Hartwell did not interrupt. She took notes in a black leather notebook with a fountain pen. When Wyatt finished, she asked him 3 questions. She asked, "How certain are you that the cut on the brake line is not consistent with crash damage?" Wyatt said, "Agent Hartwell, I have been restoring Corvettes for 21 years. I have rebuilt 47 L88 engines. I have replaced thousands of brake lines. The cut is 17 inches above the caliper. It is a clean 90-degree cut through the steel braiding. It was made with a precision tool. A crash does not make a cut like that. A crash tears." She asked, "Why did your brother believe Senator Whitmore was involved with Reed Holcomb?" Wyatt said, "I do not know specifically. Cody did not write that part down, but the campaign finance records of Senator Whitmore are public. Cody knew how to read them. I can read them too. Holcomb Energy and Reed Holcomb personally have contributed approximately $4.2 million to Senator Whitmore's campaigns and associated political action committees over the last 18 years. Senator Whitmore appointed the current superintendent of the Wyoming Highway Patrol. Senator Whitmore's brother sits on the board of the bank that holds the line of credit for Holcomb Energy Holdings. "It is not a complicated picture, Agent," she asked. "Who else knows you are here?" Wyatt said. "Nobody. My daughter believes I drove to Pine Bluffs to visit my mother. My mother does not know I left Cheyenne." Special Agent Hartwell set down her fountain pen. She said, "Mr. Caldwell, I am going to keep this folder. I am going to keep the brake line sample. I am going to have one of our agents drive to Cheyenne tomorrow morning with a chain of custody form to take possession of the Corvette wreckage. I am going to open a federal preliminary investigation under Title 18 United States Code Section 951, the Hobbs Act, on the theory that Holcomb Energy has used violence and the threat of violence to interfere with interstate commerce in petroleum. I am going to refer the campaign finance question to our public corruption unit at headquarters. I am also going to contact the Department of the Interior Office of the Inspector General because the Bureau of Land Management has been informed of an active federal trespass on a federal mineral lease, and that gives us additional jurisdiction." "Do you understand what I am telling you?" Wyatt said. "I understand that you believed me." Special Agent Hartwell said, "I have read 7,000 intake statements in 19 years, Mr. Caldwell. I know what a wildcatter's handwriting looks like. I know what a brake line looks like. I know what an oil and gas billionaire who thinks he owns a senator looks like. Go home to your daughter. Do not tell anyone in Wyoming that you came here. Do not change your routine. We will be in touch within 7 days." Wyatt stood up. He shook the agent's hand. He walked out of the FBI Salt Lake City field office at 10:46 on the morning of March 4, 2026. He got into the 1969 Corvette ZL1. He drove back to Cheyenne. He arrived home at 6:08 that evening. Cheyenne was waiting for him on the porch. She said, "Daddy, you did not go to Pine Bluffs," Grandma called. "You were not there." Wyatt sat down beside his daughter on the porch. He told her everything. When he finished, Cheyenne did not cry. She did not speak for a long time. She looked out at the Wyoming sky to the west of the house, where the sun was setting behind the Laramie Mountains. Finally, she said, "Daddy, Uncle Cody was murdered." Wyatt said, "Yes." Cheyenne said, "And the FBI believes you." Wyatt said, "Yes." Cheyenne said, "Then we are going to be in danger." Wyatt said, "Yes." Cheyenne said, "Good. Because I have been training Tornado Bell for 10 years for the National Finals Rodeo, and I am not letting Reed Holcomb make me miss it. If somebody is going to come for us, they had better come quick." She stood up. She walked into the house. She came back out 3 minutes later carrying her grandfather's Winchester Model 94 lever-action rifle and a box of .30-30 cartridges. She handed the rifle to her father. She said, "Just in case." The federal investigation moved faster than Wyatt expected. On March 11th, 7 days after Wyatt's visit to the Salt Lake City field office, 2 FBI agents arrived at Caldwell Performance with a chain of custody form, a flatbed trailer, and a federal grand jury subpoena. They took possession of the 1967 Corvette L88 wreckage. They drove it to a federal forensic laboratory in Quantico, Virginia. The brake line, the chassis, the wheel assemblies, and every component of the braking and suspension systems were photographed, X-rayed, metallurgically analyzed, and examined under scanning electron microscope. The metallurgical report came back on March 28th. It confirmed Wyatt's assessment. The cut on the right rear brake line had been made with a precision steel cutting tool, consistent with a handheld cable cutter of the type used in oilfield maintenance, sized for half-inch reinforced steel cable. The cut was made between 48 and 72 hours before the crash. The metallurgy of the cut surface showed no oxidation that would have been present if the cut had been made earlier. The remaining steel braiding above the cut had been weakened to the point that it would have held under normal driving conditions but failed under hard braking, exactly the kind of braking required to negotiate a sharp curve at high speed. The Wyoming Highway Patrol accident report had not mentioned the cut, because the Wyoming Highway Patrol had not examined the brake line. On April 2nd, Special Agent Sarah Hartwell flew to Cheyenne to interview Wyatt for a second time. She brought with her a junior agent named Michael Ortega and a forensic accountant from the FBI's Public Corruption Unit named Diane Vasconcelos. They sat in the back office of Caldwell Performance for 6 hours. Special Agent Hartwell told Wyatt that the federal investigation now included 3 additional matters beyond the Hobbs Act case on his brother's death. The first was a federal minerals trespass case being prepared by the Department of the Interior Office of the Inspector General, based on Cody's WOGC complaint and the BLM downhole surveys that had been obtained under federal subpoena. The second was a tax investigation by the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division, based on accounting irregularities found in Holcomb Energy's quarterly federal filings going back to 2019. The third was a federal campaign finance investigation involving Senator Bradley Whitmore, based on a pattern of contributions from Holcomb Energy executives and shell entities that the Public Corruption Unit had been quietly tracking since 2022. Special Agent Hartwell did not tell Wyatt the full scope of the campaign finance investigation. She said only, "Senator Whitmore is not going to be a senator much longer. That is for us to handle. You handle your daughter, your garage, and your safety." Wyatt asked what he should do if Reed Holcomb came to his garage. Special Agent Hartwell said, "He will not come to your garage. He is going to use intermediaries. The intermediaries will be plausible, buyers for the Corvette wreckage, a lawyer offering to settle some imagined civil claim, an insurance investigator, a journalist who is not really a journalist. They will be polite. They will offer money. They will measure your response. They are gathering information for him. They are not authorized to harm you, because he believes harm to you would attract more federal attention. So far, he is correct. So when they come, you do what people in the collector car community always do when they do not want to talk to somebody. You tell them politely that you are not interested. You do not show them anything. You do not let them into the back bay. You call me. Here is my direct number." She gave him a business card. The first intermediary arrived on April 19th. He was a man in his mid-50s, well-dressed, soft hands, who identified himself as a buyer's agent representing an undisclosed European collector. He said his client was interested in acquiring the wreckage of the 1967 L88. He offered $400,000 in cash on the condition that the sale be completed within 48 hours and that all paperwork, title, accident report, restoration records, be transferred with the car. Wyatt told him the car was no longer on the premises and that he had no authority to sell it. The man left. Special Agent Hartwell's surveillance team identified him within 90 minutes as a private investigator from Denver who had done work for Holcomb Energy on 3 previous matters. The second intermediary arrived on May 2nd. She was a woman in her mid-40s who identified herself as a freelance journalist from Denver, writing a piece for a national magazine on the surviving 1967 L88 Corvettes. She asked Wyatt if she could photograph the wreckage and interview him about his brother's accident. Wyatt told her the wreckage was no longer on the premises and that he did not give interviews. She left. Special Agent Hartwell's team identified her as a former employee of a Casper-based public relations firm that had Holcomb Energy as a client until 2023. The third intermediary did not come. On May 14, 2026, Special Agent Hartwell called Wyatt at 7:15 in the morning. She said, "Mr. Caldwell, the federal grand jury in the District of Wyoming has returned a sealed indictment. We will be making arrests in approximately 3 hours. I am calling you because the indictment will be unsealed at noon and there will be press coverage by mid-afternoon. I want you to be home with your daughter when that happens. I am sending 2 agents to your house to stay with you until the situation stabilizes. Lock the doors. Keep the rifle close. Do not answer the phone unless you recognize the number. I will see you on television." At 10:47 on the morning of May 14th, FBI agents arrived at the Casper headquarters of Holcomb Energy Holdings. They arrested Reed Holcomb in his 32nd floor office. They walked him out in handcuffs through a lobby filled with employees and 3 reporters who had been tipped by an unknown source. At 11:03, FBI agents arrived at the Washington, D.C. residence of Senator Bradley Whitmore. They arrested him in his pajamas. They walked him out to a waiting black Chevrolet Suburban. At 11:15, FBI agents arrested Garrett Voss, the vice president of land acquisition for Holcomb Energy, at his home in Cheyenne. They arrested 4 other Holcomb Energy executives at offices in Casper and Denver. They arrested 2 precision machinists who had worked on Holcomb Energy drilling rigs at the time of Cody Caldwell's death, both of whom had purchased new pickup trucks with cash within 60 days of the accident. The sealed indictment was unsealed at 12:01 Mountain Time. It contained 73 counts across all defendants: federal trespass on a mineral lease, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit murder for hire across state lines, tax evasion, honest services fraud. bribery of a federal official, obstruction of justice. The estimated total in fines, forfeitures, and civil settlements would later be reported at $112 million. At 3:22 in the afternoon on May 14th, a black GMC Yukon pulled up in front of Caldwell Performance on East Lincoln Way in Cheyenne. A woman in her early 40s got out. She walked to the front door. She rang the bell. When Wyatt opened the door, she said, "Mr. Caldwell, my name is Caroline McKinney. I am a reporter with Wyoming Public Radio. I was the only journalist in the state who wrote that your brother's accident did not make sense. I have a copy of my November 22, 2024 story on my phone. I would like to talk to you about what happened today." Wyatt looked at her for a long time. He said, "Mrs. McKinney, come inside. I will tell you everything." The Wyoming Public Radio interview ran for 23 minutes. It aired on May 17th at 6 o'clock in the morning during the morning edition broadcast. It was picked up by National Public Radio for national distribution that afternoon. It was the first interview Wyatt Caldwell had ever given in his life. He told Caroline McKinney about Cody. He told her about Eliza. He told her about Bonneville. He told her about the 4 purchase offers, the Wagee hearing, the letter dated November 6th. He told her about the 7-hour drive to Salt Lake City. He told her about Special Agent Sarah Hartwell. He did not cry during the interview. He did not raise his voice. He spoke in the measured, plain Wyoming English of a man who had spent his entire life around men who did not waste words. Toward the end of the interview, Caroline McKinney asked him why he had decided to drive to Utah instead of calling Wyoming authorities. Wyatt said, "Because my brother told me to." Caroline McKinney asked him what he wanted listeners to take away from the story. Wyatt said, "I want them to understand that a wildcat oil driller in Casper, Wyoming, who owned 3 sections of mineral rights in a one-man shop and 1 pickup truck, kept better records than a billionaire who owned a senator. My brother Cody wrote everything down. He kept every letter. He marked every map. He filed every complaint. He understood that the only thing a man like Reed Holcomb cannot fight is paper. Paper is patient. Paper does not get frightened. Paper does not get bought. Paper outlives the man who wrote it. My brother is dead, but his paper is alive. His paper is in a federal courthouse in Cheyenne right now. His paper is going to put Reed Holcomb in a federal prison for the rest of his life. So if anybody listening to this is a working man who has been pushed around by somebody bigger than you, I want you to write it down. All of it, every letter, every conversation, every threat, put it in a folder. Give the folder to somebody you trust. Tell them what to do if something happens to you, because the man who keeps the letter wins." The interview ended. It became, in the language of the Wyoming Public Radio program director, the most downloaded segment in the station's 28-year history. It was rebroadcast by member stations in 41 states. The transcript was reprinted in the Casper Star-Tribune, the Wyoming Tribune-Eagle, the Salt Lake Tribune, the Denver Post, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. On May 22nd, the federal criminal trial of Reed Holcomb began in the United States District Court for the District of Wyoming in Cheyenne. Wyatt Caldwell testified on the 3rd day of the trial. His testimony lasted 4 hours and 11 minutes. He brought the manila folder. He brought the brake line. He brought the 47 photographs. When the federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Lynn, asked Wyatt to explain to the jury what the cut on the brake line indicated, Wyatt held up the steel-braided line and looked directly at Reed Holcomb in the defendant's chair. He said, "Mr. Holcomb, the micropattern on this brake line did not come from a Wyoming accident. It came from a precision tool, the kind a wildcat oil rig has. My brother Cody welded oil rigs for 20 years. He knew the difference, so do I. So does the FBI in Salt Lake City." The courtroom was silent for 9 seconds. Reed Holcomb did not respond. His lead defense attorney, a partner from a Denver firm whose name had appeared on his door for 34 years, leaned over to his client and whispered something. Holcomb shook his head. The jury deliberated for 2 days. On June 3, 2026, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on 68 of the 73 counts. Reed Holcomb was sentenced on August 19th to 2 consecutive life sentences plus 412 years, without the possibility of parole. Senator Bradley Whitmore pled guilty in a separate proceeding to honest services fraud and was sentenced to 27 years in federal prison. Garrett Voss, the 4 other Holcomb Energy executives, and the 2 precision machinists pled guilty in exchange for cooperation. The machinists received 25 years each. The executives received between 14 and 22 years. The civil settlement on behalf of the Caldwell estate, paid by Holcomb Energy Holdings and its insurance carriers, was finalized on October 11, 2026. The total amount was $7,800,000. The funds were placed in a trust administered by a Cheyenne law firm on behalf of Wyatt Caldwell and his daughter. Holcomb Energy Holdings filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on October 22nd. The University of Wyoming announced on November 3rd that the Holcomb name would be removed from the Holcomb Energy Petroleum Engineering building. The plaque was taken down on November 14th. On the morning of December 18, 2026, Cheyenne Caldwell won the barrel racing competition at the Wyoming Stock Show in Casper. Her time was 14.83 seconds. It moved her to 9th place in the W standings, qualifying her for the National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas. Wyatt was in the stands. He did not cry then either. He cried 5 days later when she handed him an envelope at the breakfast table. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. It was the WPRA confirmation of her qualifying position. At the bottom, she had written in pen, "For Mom, for Uncle Cody. Run number 12 at the NFR is dedicated to them. I love you, Daddy." Wyatt Caldwell sat at the breakfast table in his small house on the west side of Cheyenne, holding the letter, and he cried for the first time since August 12, 2018. He cried for 31 minutes. When he finished, he stood up. He walked to the back of the house, to the garage where he kept the 1969 Corvette ZL1. He pulled the cover off the car. He looked at the dashboard. He looked at the seat where Eliza had sat 14 times during the Bonneville run of 1998. He looked at the steering wheel. He said out loud to no one, "It is time." The drive from Cheyenne, Wyoming, to the Bonneville Salt Flats in Tooele County, Utah, is 471 miles. Wyatt made the drive on the morning of August 11, 2027, 8 years and 364 days after the afternoon Eliza died, and exactly 29 years to the day after he had set the Class C MS record at 218.4 miles per hour. He did not drive the Corvette ZL1 himself. He hauled it on a flatbed trailer behind a 2019 Ford F-450 Julie that he had bought 3 months earlier specifically for this trip. He did not want to put highway miles on the engine before the run. The car was ready. He had spent 6 months rebuilding the powertrain, new bearings, fresh valve job, new aluminum heads, new Holley 850 carburetor, new aluminum intake, new headers, new hooker exhaust, new posi traction unit with a 4/5/6 gear ratio. The car had been on his chassis dyno 6 weeks earlier. It had made 712 horsepower at the rear wheels. It was the most powerful Bonneville legal motor he had ever built. Cheyenne rode in the passenger seat of the F-450. She was 19 years old now. The National Finals Rodeo had ended in mid-December. She had finished 11th overall. Run number 12, which she had dedicated to her mother and her uncle, had been her fastest run of the week, 13.71 seconds. She had not won, but she had been there, and she had ridden Tornado Bell the way she had been trained to. The Bonneville Speed Week of August 2027 was held under permits from the Bureau of Land Management and the Southern California Timing Association. The salt was in good condition that year. 3 years of average winter precipitation had left the surface hard and flat. The conditions for record runs were favorable. Wyatt arrived at the BLM staging area at noon on August 11th. He unloaded the Corvette. He passed tech inspection. He drew his run order. He was scheduled to make his first attempt at 3:15 in the afternoon. Cheyenne walked the salt with him. She wore her mother's old Bonneville hat, a faded blue baseball cap with the Sista logo on the front. She carried the timing equipment that her mother had been holding on August 12, 2018. She set it up at the 2-mile marker, exactly where her mother had set it up. At 2:57 in the afternoon, the cloud bank that had been building to the north over the Stansbury Mountains broke up and moved east. The sky over the salt flats was clear. At 3:12, Wyatt climbed into the Corvette ZL1. He buckled his 5-point harness. He pulled on his S5-rated helmet. He looked over to the timing area, 2 miles down course, where his daughter was watching through binoculars. He keyed his radio. He said, "Cheyenne, this is your father. I am ready." Cheyenne's voice came back. "Daddy." "Mama is here. I can feel her. Drive the car." Wyatt nodded inside his helmet. He fired the engine. He brought the revs up to 2,800. He let out the clutch. The Corvette moved off the line. He worked through the gears, first at 3,500 RPM, second at 5,800, third at 6,200. The car was clean, the car was straight, the car was alive. At the 1-mile marker, his speed was registered at 183 miles per hour. At the 1.5-mile marker, 204 miles per hour. At the 2-mile marker, where his daughter was standing, 228.6 miles per hour. He held the throttle. At the 3-mile marker, 231 miles per hour, he lifted. He coasted to the shutdown area at the 5-mile marker. He pulled the parachute. The Corvette came to a stop. He climbed out of the car. He walked to the timing tower. The official from the Southern California Timing Association confirmed the speed, 228.6 miles per hour over the measured mile. It was the fastest run of his life. It exceeded his 1998 record by 10.2 miles per hour. It set a new Class CMS record for the small block hybrid configuration. The official handed him the record certificate. Cheyenne walked across the salt from the timing equipment. She was crying. She handed him her mother's old Sitka hat. She said, "Daddy, put it on." Wyatt put on the hat. He stood on the Bonneville Salt Flats, in the place where his wife had died 9 years earlier, holding a record certificate that bore his name and the name of the woman who had been buried in a small cemetery in Pine Bluffs, Wyoming, since August 15, 2018. He looked at his daughter. He said, "Cheyenne, your mother would have been proud." Cheyenne said, "Daddy, she is proud. She is right here. She has always been right here." They stood on the salt as the sun moved toward the Stansbury Mountains. A reporter from Wyoming Public Radio named Caroline McKinney, who had driven down from Salt Lake City that morning specifically to cover the run, walked across the salt with a microphone. She asked Wyatt if he had anything he wanted to say. Wyatt looked at her for a moment. He looked at the salt. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the Corvette ZL1, parked at the end of the course 2 miles away, the parachute still trailing behind it in the small wind. He said, "The salt takes everything, my wife. 8 years of my life. A piece of my brother that he gave to me before he died. The salt takes it all. But sometimes, once in a long while, the salt gives something back. It gave me one more run. It gave me one more record. It gave me one more afternoon with my daughter on the same patch of ground where I lost her mother. The salt is honest. The salt does not lie. The salt does not buy senators. The salt does not cut brake lines. The salt is just the salt. And a man like my brother Cody, who kept his letters and filed his complaints and would not be bought. That man is more powerful than a billionaire who thought he owned a state. That is what I want people to remember. The salt and the man who kept the letter. And the daughter who would not be afraid. That is the story." Caroline McKinney did not speak for a long time. Then she said, "Mr. Caldwell, thank you." Wyatt Caldwell walked back across the salt with his daughter. The sun was setting behind the Stansbury Mountains, and the salt was turning gold. They drove home to Wyoming. The garage on East Lincoln Way was waiting for them. The sunfire yellow paint on the rear quarter panel of the wrecked 1967 L88 was still cracked but intact, in the back bay where it had been returned to him by the federal evidence custodian 3 weeks earlier. He would restore it. He would take his time. He would do it right. The car would never be sold. And on the back wall of Caldwell Performance, above the workbench where he kept his torque wrenches, the 2 wooden plaques would now be joined by a third. Brass on dark walnut, the lettering Simple Caldwell, Class CMS, 228.6 mph, August 11, 2027 for Eliza, for Cody the Salt remembers.